The galactic training station, Crestfall, floated above a quiet star, its steel hull glimmering with the light of the nearby sun. It was a place where warriors, soldiers, and peacekeepers from across the known galaxy gathered to learn from one another. Recruits of all shapes and species filled its halls: scaled reptilians, insectoid tacticians, feathered avians with piercing eyes, and even massive tusked warriors whose homeworlds were considered death planets. Among these towering and often fearsome beings stood a human. His name was Sergeant Arik Hayes, a soldier from Earth. By comparison to the others, he seemed ordinary. No natural claws, no armored hide, no wings or venom. Just soft skin, short hair, and a steady gaze. Most of the recruits had never seen a human before. The galaxy often dismissed Earth as a minor world, a place not yet advanced enough to matter. Humans were labeled soft-worlders because their planet, while dangerous by their own standards, was considered tame compared to volcanic acid-filled or predator-rich worlds some aliens came from. That morning, the recruits gathered inside the training hall. The space was vast, its walls lined with practice weapons, hollow screens, and observation balconies. The floor gleamed under bright lights, polished smooth from decades of drills and sparring. At the center stood Commander Relvar, the station's chief instructor. His tall, lean frame was covered in dark blue scales that shimmered slightly under the lights. His 4 golden eyes scanned the room with the precision of a predator. He was respected and feared not only for his skill in combat but for his sharp tongue. Today, Relvar's voice boomed across the hall, we test your close combat readiness. It is not enough to rely on ships, on weapons, or on your species' natural strengths. You must prove you can fight with your own bodies, with your own wits when all else fails. The recruits nodded, some with eagerness, some with nerves. Close combat was dangerous, far more personal than ranged battles. One by one, recruits from different species stepped forward to demonstrate. A hulking reptilian with bone spikes jutting from his shoulders slammed his fists together and showed off crushing strikes, denting a reinforced practice dummy. The crowd cheered. An insectoid cadet, thin but quick, used his multiple limbs to overwhelm an opponent in a blur of speed. The audience clattered their limbs in approval. A feathered avian recruit displayed acrobatics, spinning and darting with aerial swiftness. Another used sheer mass, body slamming a target until the floor cracked. Each demonstration ended with applause, and with whispered remarks comparing one style to another. Finally, Commander Relvar's golden eyes landed on the human. Sergeant Hayes, he said, his voice sharp. Your turn. The room quieted. Many recruits leaned closer, eager to see what this soft-worlder could possibly do. Some grinned, expecting embarrassment. Arik Hayes stepped forward. His movements were calm, steady, but there was no arrogance in his stride. He stood before Relvar, hands clasped behind his back, awaiting instruction. The commander tilted his head, the ridges along his neck flaring in amusement. Humans, he said, almost with a hiss. No claws, no exoskeleton, no natural weapons. What will you show us, Earthborn? A few chuckles rippled through the recruits. Relvar's gaze shifted to the side. A maintenance worker had left a cleaning tool nearby, a long-handled mop propped against the wall. The commander's lip curled into a sharp smile. Here, Relvar said, gesturing to the mop. Show us what human combat is worth. With this, laughter burst from the crowd. A tusked warrior let out a booming snort. The insectoids clicked their mandibles in amusement. Even the feathered recruits tilted their heads, feathers ruffling with mockery. Arik looked at the mop for a moment. Then he walked over, picked it up, and examined it. His expression remained neutral, though his eyes carried a quiet intensity. Without a word, he gripped the handle firmly and snapped it in half across his knee. The sharp crack echoed through the hall. The laughter stopped instantly. Arik now held 2 jagged wooden pieces, one in each hand. He rolled them experimentally, testing their weight like batons. His movements were smooth, practiced, efficient. Then he stepped into a ready stance, his body angled, his eyes forward. On Earth, Arik said, his voice steady but carrying across the room, you fight with whatever you have. If it breaks, you don't stop. You adapt, the recruit stared. Even Commander Relvar's golden eyes narrowed slightly, surprise flickering in them. Arik began to move. Slowly at first, demonstrating basic strikes, quick jabs, sharp swings, precise thrusts. His form was clean, his grip solid. The broken mop handles blurred as he spun them around, transitioning seamlessly from attack to defense. He shifted into fluid motions, stepping lightly, pivoting, striking with surprising speed. The silence in the hall grew heavier. The recruits no longer laughed. They watched, trying to follow the rhythm of the movements, the unexpected sharpness in every strike. Finally, Arik stopped. He planted the two broken handles into the floor and stood tall. The quiet broke when one of the tusked warriors let out a low growl. Parlor tricks. Splintered sticks. That is not combat. Arik met his gaze calmly. Would you like to test it? Murmurs swept through the recruits. Commander Relvar's lips curved upward again, but this time his smile was different. Less mocking, more curious. Very well, Relvar said. A volunteer may step forward. The tusked warrior slammed his heavy foot on the ground, the sound like thunder. I will. Let us see what the Earthborn can do. He strode forward, towering over Arik. His tusks gleamed and his muscular frame promised overwhelming strength. The recruit shifted eagerly, expecting the human to be crushed. Arik adjusted his grip on the broken handles. His expression remained calm, but his eyes never left his opponent. Begin, Relvar commanded. The tusked warrior lunged, massive arms swinging like hammers. Arik moved. He stepped aside with quick precision, the broken mop handle snapping forward to strike the warrior's wrist. The warrior grunted, surprised at the sting. He swung again, but Arik ducked under the blow, pivoted and drove the other handle into the warrior's side. Not enough to injure, but enough to disrupt balance. The recruits gasped. The warrior roared in frustration, attacking with renewed fury. Yet every strike was dodged, redirected, or countered. Arik's movements were smaller, sharper, using leverage instead of brute strength. At one point, he hooked the handle behind the warrior's arm and twisted, forcing him off balance. The massive fighter stumbled forward, barely catching himself before falling. Arik stepped back, twirling the broken handles once more. The hall was silent again. Commander Relvar's golden eyes gleamed. Interesting, he murmured. The tusked warrior growled, his pride wounded, but he did not advance again. He knew, as the others did, that the human could have struck harder if he wished. Arik lowered the mop handles and looked around at the silent recruits. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. Tools break, weapons fail, but the fight does not end. That is what humans understand. No one laughed this time. Even Relvar, the seasoned instructor, found himself unsettled. This human had taken a joke, a simple cleaning tool, and turned it into a lesson that silenced the hall. The mop handle demonstration was no longer something to mock. It was something to remember. And though none of them realized it yet, this was only the beginning. The training hall on the Crestfall station remained strangely quiet after the human's first demonstration. The echo of the mop handle snapping still seemed to linger in the minds of every recruit. They had come expecting laughter, expecting weakness, expecting a fragile being to be embarrassed. Instead, they had witnessed something unexpected. Commander Relvar's 4 golden eyes followed Sergeant Arik Hayes as the human calmly set down the broken mop handles at the edge of the floor. The commander's expression was thoughtful now, his ridged mouth curling into a faint, unreadable smile. Interesting, Relvar muttered again. Around the hall, the recruits whispered among themselves. How did he move so fast? A feathered avian asked, ruffling his wings. He struck with wood like it was steel. An insectoid clicked in disbelief. It was luck, growled the tusked warrior who had faced Arik. His pride burned, but his voice was quieter than before. Relvar raised a clawed hand, silencing the hall. Sergeant Hayes, continue. You have our attention. Arik straightened, calm as always. What would you like me to show? Relvar gestured to the racks of training weapons lining the walls. Shock staves, weighted poles, and blunted practice blades. Choose, demonstrate again. Arik walked over, eyes scanning the rack. His hand hovered near the polished weapons, but did not pick one. Instead, he crouched down beside a toolbox left by maintenance workers. He pulled out a short length of pipe, dented and uneven. Then he grabbed a discarded scrap of plating, sharp-edged but manageable. He stood holding the pipe in one hand and the metal plate in the other. The recruit stared. You ignore the training weapons? Relvar asked, his tone sharp but curious. Arik nodded. Weapons are good, but in the field you don't always get to choose. You fight with what you find. He lifted the pipe. This can be a club. He held up the plate. And this can be a shield. Some recruits scoffed again. A reptilian snorted smoke from his nostrils. A real warrior does not fight with junk. Arik's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. A real survivor fights with anything. Relvar leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Show us then. Demonstrate. Arik stepped into the center of the floor. He shifted his stance, pipe in his right hand, plate in his left. His body angled, light on his feet. He tapped the pipe against the floor once, clang, and then began to move. The pipe blurred as he swung it, striking the air in precise arcs. The plate snapped up to block, redirect, and deflect. He advanced and retreated fluidly, his motions fast but efficient. Each strike looked sharp, each defense timed. The recruits found themselves leaning forward unconsciously. The pipe and plate were nothing special, yet in Arik's hands they looked deadly. Then he stopped, turning to the gathered recruits. Any volunteers? Silence. The tusked warrior from earlier growled low but did not step forward. He had already been embarrassed once. Finally, a reptilian recruit raised his claw. His scales were a mottled green, and his muscles rippled as he stepped into the circle. I will test this, he hissed. Relvar nodded in approval. Good, no death strikes, begin. The reptilian lunged immediately, claws slashing. His species relied on brute power and natural weapons. His strikes were fast, heavy, and lethal looking, even blunted for training. Arik shifted aside, raising the plate. The claws scraped harmlessly off the metal with a screech. In the same motion, Arik's pipe snapped forward, striking the reptilian's forearm. The alien hissed, recoiling. The reptilian swung again, trying to overpower. Arik ducked, raised the plate to catch the claws, then twisted his body. The pipe cracked against the reptilian's thigh just above the knee. Not enough to break, but enough to make him stagger. Gasps rippled through the recruits. The reptilian growled louder, anger rising. He came again, faster, slashing wildly. But Arik's plate absorbed the blows, redirecting the energy aside. His pipe struck again, forearm, ribs, shoulder. Sharp taps that rattled the reptilian without crippling him. Finally, Arik stepped in close. With the plate, he shoved against the reptilian's chest, knocking him slightly off balance. Then the pipe hooked behind his leg and swept. The reptilian crashed onto the floor with a loud thud. The hall went silent once more. Arik stepped back, lowering his makeshift weapons. That is how a human fights. The reptilian lay there, stunned more by humiliation than pain. He growled but did not rise. The message was clear. Commander Relvar's ridges twitched. His eyes gleamed with sharp interest. Impressive. You take trash and make it useful, resourceful, unpredictable. Arik gave a small nod. On Earth we had to. Our ancestors fought without claws or armor. We learned to use stones, sticks, bones, anything. It is in our nature. The recruits whispered again, but this time it was not laughter. It was unease, curiosity. A few even looked thoughtful, as if reconsidering their own training. Relvar raised his hand once more. Enough whispers. If you doubt the human, step forward. He invites challenge. Take it. There was a pause. Then 3 recruits moved at once, a feathered avian, an insectoid, and another tusked warrior. Relvar's golden eyes gleamed. A group then? Very well. Let us see. The 3 spread out, circling Arik. The avian darted forward first, fast and agile. Wings snapped open for balance as sharp talons slashed. Arik blocked with the plate, sparks flying as metal met claw. He twisted, swinging the pipe to keep the avian back. At the same moment, the insectoid skittered in low, multiple arms reaching. Arik pivoted, driving the plate down like a hammer, pinning 2 limbs to the floor. The insectoid screeched. Arik's pipe slammed against its carapace with a sharp crack. Not enough to break through, but enough to jolt it back. The tusked warrior charged from behind, massive arms reaching to grab. Arik rolled forward, slipping under, and rose to his feet in one motion. The tusked warrior stumbled past him, nearly colliding with the insectoid. The hall erupted in shocked gasps. The 3 regrouped, circling again. Sweat, or its alien equivalent, shone on their bodies. Arik adjusted his stance, breathing steady. His eyes scanned, reading each opponent. He was outnumbered, outsized, and by galactic standards, outmatched. Yet his calm never broke. They charged together, this time the avian slashed. Arik blocked with the plate. The tusked warrior swung. Arik ducked and jammed the pipe into his ribs, forcing him back. The insectoid lashed with 4 arms at once. Arik twisted, using the plate as cover, the pipe striking again and again. The fight became a blur of motion, scraping claws, crashing blows, rapid counters. The recruits shouted in disbelief. Then, with a sharp twist, Arik slammed the plate against the avian's wing joint. The avian shrieked, stumbling back. He pivoted, hooking the tusked warrior's leg with the pipe, making him stumble. The insectoid lunged desperately and Arik sidestepped, letting it crash into its own teammate. The three ended in a tangled heap on the floor. Arik stood above them, pipe in one hand, plate in the other. His breathing was heavier now, but his eyes remained calm, sharp. The hall was silent for the third time that day. Then Commander Relvar let out a low, rumbling laugh. Not mocking, genuine amusement. Well done, human, he said. You have given us much to think about. The recruit stared at Arik with new eyes. No longer as a soft-worlder, no longer as a joke, but as something far stranger, far more dangerous. Arik set the pipe and plate down quietly, then clasped his hands behind his back. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. You may have natural weapons. You may have power. But humans? We make weapons. Out of anything, Relvar's golden eyes gleamed. And that, he said softly, is what makes you dangerous. The mop handle, still broken on the floor, now seemed less like a joke and more like a symbol, and none of them would ever forget it. The training hall of Crestfall Station had never been so quiet. 3 recruits, stronger and larger than a human, still sat on the floor rubbing bruises and dents from their sparring match with Sergeant Arik Hayes. The human stood calmly in the center, his breathing steady, as if the fight had been nothing more than a warm-up. The recruits who had been mocking him before now avoided his eyes. Some were unsettled. Others were secretly impressed. Commander Relvar watched with 4 golden eyes, his scaled face showing a sharp, unreadable smile. Enough, Relvar said at last, his voice echoing in the hall. You have all seen it. The human is not weak. He is not to be dismissed. Learn from him. But not everyone agreed. Among the crowd, a cluster of recruits whispered angrily. The reptilian warriors hissed that the demonstration was staged. The tusked fighters muttered that the human only won because they held back. Even the insectoids clattered their mandibles in frustration. One voice rose louder than the rest. This is trickery, a reptilian shouted, stepping forward. His scales were dark red, his tail lashing the air in anger. The human does not have strength. He hides behind tricks and toys. He would not last in a real fight. Others shouted in support. Yes, it is dishonor. He makes us look like fools. Relvar raised his hand for silence, but the recruits were restless now. Pride burned in their chests. None wanted to admit that a soft-skinned being with no natural weapons had bested them. Arik remained calm, standing with his arms folded. He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. His silence seemed to irritate the recruits even more. Relvar finally spoke, his tone sharp. What would you suggest, then? Another test? The red-scaled reptilian hissed, his eyes glowing with challenge. Yes, let him fight more. Let him face us all together. If he wins, then we will believe. A murmur swept through the hall. More recruits nodded. Some pounded fists against their chests. Relvar considered this for a moment. Then, with a dangerous smile, he looked at Arik. Sergeant Hayes, do you accept? Arik tilted his head slightly. How many? 10, the reptilian snarled. No less. The hall erupted in noise. 10 recruits chosen from the strongest and fastest of different species. It was madness, but Arik did not flinch. He simply nodded once. I accept, the crowd gasped. Even Relvar's scales rippled with surprise. He had not expected the human to agree so easily. Very well, the commander thought. Let us see what you are truly made of. The circle of challenge, the center of the training hall, was cleared. 10 recruits stepped forward, each towering over the human. A tusked warrior cracked his knuckles, his muscles bulging. A feathered avian spread his wings wide, talons gleaming. 2 insectoids clicked their mandibles eagerly. The red-scaled reptilian led them, his tail thrashing. Relvar raised his hand. Rules are simple. No killing blows, no weapons from the racks. Fight until one side is unable to continue. Arik reached down and picked up the broken mop handle from earlier. The jagged wood looked unimpressive compared to the claws, tusks, and armor of the others. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd again, but this time it was nervous laughter. Many remembered what he had already done with those broken sticks. Relvar's voice boomed. Begin! The battle the reptilian leader charged first, claws slashing. Arik shifted sideways, light on his feet, and swung the mop handle against the reptilian's arm. The sharp crack made the alien hiss and stumble. Before Arik could reset, a tusked warrior rushed in with a roar, his massive arms reaching. Arik dropped low, rolling aside. The tusked warrior's own momentum carried him past, nearly colliding with his teammate. An insectoid came next, skittering forward on four limbs, its mandibles clacking. Arik thrust the mop handle forward, jamming it between its arms. He twisted hard using leverage and sent the insectoid crashing to the ground. The crowd shouted in shock, but the other fighters did not wait. The avian swooped from above, wings beating. Arik lifted the broken stick like a spear, forcing the avian to twist in midair and land awkwardly. Another tusked warrior swung from behind and Arik ducked just in time. The blow passed over his head with a rush of air. Arik struck low, wrapping the warrior's shin with the wood. The tusked fighter growled in pain, stumbling. The fight grew wild. Claws scraped against the floor. Wings flapped. Mandibles clattered. The human moved constantly, never staying still. He dodged, sidestepped, spun. His broken mop handle struck again and again, arms, legs, joints, never enough to cripple but always enough to disrupt. To the recruits watching, it looked unreal. 10 against 1, and yet the human was still standing. The turning point for a moment, the human seemed untouchable. But then the numbers began to press harder. The reptilian leader circled behind him. A tusked warrior came from the front. The insectoid darted in low. All three attacked at once. Arik blocked the claws with his mop handle, but the force snapped the wood further, leaving him with a shorter piece. The tusked warrior's massive fist grazed his side, making him stagger. The insectoid's limb caught his ankle, nearly pulling him down. The crowd roared, some cheering, some gasping. Arik stumbled, but he did not fall. Instead, he shifted, twisting his body. With a sharp motion, he jammed the jagged wood into the insectoid's limb, forcing it to release him. He rolled aside, avoiding another tusked strike. His face was calm, but sweat dripped down his forehead. He was breathing harder now. Still, his eyes were sharp, focused. "You're slowing, human," the reptilian taunted, circling. Arik said nothing. He simply raised the shorter piece of wood and readied himself again. Human resilience. The fight continued. Every time the recruits thought they had him, the human slipped away. He used the reptilian's tail against him, hooking it with the broken stick to trip him. He used one tusked warrior's bulk to block another's strike. He ducked under wings, rolled beneath claws, and even used a fallen insectoid as cover. The crowd's cheers grew louder with every move. At first they had wanted to see the human fail. Now many of them were shouting his name. Hayes. Hayes! Hayes! The recruits inside the circle grew frustrated. They were stronger, larger, faster, but they could not break him. Every strike he landed reminded them of something terrifying. If the stick were a blade, they would already be dead. The end of the match at last. The reptilian leader charged again, desperate to finish it. He lunged with claws wide, mouth open in a hiss. Arik stepped forward instead of back. He jammed the broken stick upward, hooking it against the reptilian's jaw. At the same time, he twisted his body and swept the alien's legs out from under him. The reptilian crashed to the ground with a roar. The other recruits hesitated. They were tired, bruised, and shaken. One by one, they backed away. None wanted to continue. Relvar's voice rang out. Enough! Silence fell. The human stood in the center, chest rising and falling with deep breaths. The broken mop handle hung loosely in his hand. Around him lay 10 defeated recruits, some groaning, some glaring, but none willing to rise. Arik dropped the broken stick to the floor. The sharp crack echoed through the hall once more. He straightened, his voice calm but firm. This is why you should not underestimate us. Strength fails, armor breaks, weapons shatter, but we keep going, always. The hall erupted in noise. Some recruits cheered. Others whispered in awe. Even those who hated him could not deny what they had seen. Commander Relvar watched closely, his golden eyes gleaming. For the first time in many years, the seasoned warrior felt something unusual. Not fear, not respect alone, but a deep, unsettling thought. If this is what a single human can do with a broken stick, what would a fleet of them do with real weapons? Relvar smiled slowly, showing his sharp teeth. Yes, he thought. Humanity was not to be mocked. Humanity was to be studied, and perhaps feared. The mop handle, once a joke, had become a legend, and this was only the beginning. The training hall on Crestfall Station was never the same after the 10 against 1 match. Word spread quickly through the station's corridors and beyond. Recruits whispered in the cafeterias. Officers discussed it in the strategy rooms. Even the maintenance workers retold the story while repairing hull panels. Everyone spoke about the human. They spoke about the way Sergeant Arik Hayes fought with a broken stick. They spoke about how he refused to fall even when surrounded. They spoke about how he turned junk into weapons and prideful warriors into lessons. For the other recruits, it was more than entertainment. It was a riddle. How could a species so soft, with no claws, no armor, no wings, no venom, do such things? The aftermath a few days after the fight, the recruits gathered again in the training hall. But this time they were not there for combat drills. They were there for something else, something that had never happened before. Commander Relvar stood at the front, his scaled arms crossed, his 4 golden eyes focused on the human beside him. The commander's voice was calm but carried weight. "Recruits," Relvar said, "you demanded to see the human tested. You saw, you doubted his strength. You doubted his endurance. You doubted his skill, and yet he remains standing while many of you still carry bruises." A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the room. Relvar's eyes narrowed. This is not mockery. This is instruction. And today the human will teach. The recruits shifted uncomfortably. Some bristled at the thought of learning from someone they once mocked. Others leaned forward, curious. Arik stepped forward. He was not in armor, nor did he carry any weapon. He looked plain compared to the armored scales, tusks, and wings around him. But his calm presence held the room. His voice was quiet but steady. "I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to show you something humans learned long ago. Something that kept us alive." A story from Earth. Arik picked up a small rock from the floor. Perhaps it had fallen loose from a recruit's earlier strike. He held it up between his fingers. "Do you see this?" he asked. The recruits nodded, puzzled. "This is how it started for us," Arik continued. "On Earth, we didn't have claws. We didn't have armor. But we had hands. We could throw. We could shape. We could use tools. Our ancestors learned to take rocks like this and turn them into weapons. Sharpened stone became blades. A branch became a spear. A hide became armor. That is how we survived predators far stronger than us." The recruits shifted. Some of them looked thoughtful. Others looked skeptical. Arik smiled faintly. "And when those weapons broke, we made new ones. When they were taken away, we used what was left. That's what I showed you with the mop handle. It's not about the weapon. It's about the will to fight and the creativity to keep going." A skeptical voice, a tusked warrior, raised his heavy arm. His voice was low but doubtful. "But why? Why fight with such weakness when you could simply grow stronger? When you could evolve claws or armor?" Arik met his gaze calmly. "Because that was never given to us. We had to adapt with what we had. And maybe that's what made us so dangerous. We don't wait for nature to give us power. We take it. We create it." The hall went quiet. Commander Relvar's ridges twitched slightly, showing his interest. The demonstration. Arik looked around the room. "Let's test this. Who here believes weapons are everything?" Several hands or claws or limbs rose. Arik nodded. "Good, then let's see. You'll fight me, but with one rule. You can only use your natural weapons. I'll use this." He picked up a length of discarded wire from the floor. Thin. Flexible. Worthless in most eyes. The recruits laughed nervously. The volunteer was an insectoid, tall and sharp-limbed. Its claws could slice through metal plating. It clicked its mandibles eagerly. Relvar raised a clawed hand. "Begin." The insectoid charged, claws slashing. Arik sidestepped, the wire flicking in his hand. In one motion, he looped it around the insectoid's limb and pulled. The alien stumbled, caught off balance. Arik twisted, and the wire tightened, tangling the insectoid's arms. He stepped back, pulling it taut. The insectoid screeched. Trapped. Arik released the wire before harm was done. The insectoid staggered back, humiliated. Arik turned to the others. "It's not about the tool. It's how you use it. The smallest thing can give you an edge if you know how to see it." The hall was silent again, changing minds. After that, more recruits came forward, not to challenge but to ask questions. "How do you fight when you are cornered?" asked a feathered avian. "How do you train to move so fast?" asked a reptilian. "What do you do when your body is broken?" asked a tusked warrior quietly. Arik answered each one patiently. He explained how humans trained to endure pain, to keep moving even when wounded. He explained how humans studied not just strength but patterns, watching enemies, predicting their next moves. "We don't fight harder," he said. "We fight smarter." For the first time, the recruits listened closely. Relvar's reflection. Commander Relvar stood back, watching carefully. In all his years, he had seen many warriors, many styles. Some relied on brute force, others on speed, but none had ever spoken the way this human did. None had ever turned weakness into a strength so convincingly. Relvar's golden eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Perhaps this was the lesson the galaxy had overlooked. Perhaps humanity's lack of natural weapons was not a weakness at all, but the source of their strength. A new symbol. When the lesson ended, the recruits left the hall slowly, still talking among themselves. Some were doubtful. Others were inspired, but none of them laughed anymore. The broken mop handle, still lying in the corner, had become something else now. It was no longer just a cleaning tool. It was a reminder that a human could take anything, wood, wire, or stone, and turn it into survival. Commander Relvar picked up the mop handle and set it on the wall, hanging it above the training floor. "Leave it there," he said. "Let it remind you that strength is not only in what you hold, but in who holds it." Quiet conversations. Later, in the mess hall, recruits sat together. Instead of mocking, they spoke in low voices. "Did you see how he used that wire?" one whispered. "I never thought about fighting like that," another admitted. Maybe there is more to humans than we thought." Even the tusked warrior who had once mocked Arik remained silent, chewing slowly, lost in thought. Arik himself ate quietly at a corner table, not seeking attention. He had done this many times before, on Earth, among soldiers, among doubters. He knew the pattern. First they laughed. Then they tested. Then they learned. Relvar's private question. That evening, Relvar called Arik into his office. The room was dim, lit by the glow of the stars outside. "You have changed the minds of many recruits," Relvar said. "Even mine." Arik gave a small nod. "I didn't come here to show off. I came here to prepare them. If a real battle comes, it won't matter what weapons they hold. It will matter if they know how to think." Relvar studied him with unblinking golden eyes. "Tell me, human, if your people are so dangerous, why do they hide it? Why pretend to be weak?" Arik's gaze turned distant as if he was remembering something far away. "Because sometimes," he said quietly, "it's safer if others don't know what you can do, until they need to." Relvar's ridges rippled in thought. He did not ask further. But the answer stayed with him long after Arik left the room. A growing respect days turned into weeks. Training continued, but now when Arik entered the hall, the recruits no longer smirked. They straightened. They listened. Some even asked to spar with him privately, seeking to learn his strange, adaptive style. Slowly, a new respect began to grow. The mop handle still hung on the wall. Every time a recruit looked at it, they remembered the lesson. Strength was not only claws and tusks. Sometimes it was imagination. Sometimes it was will. And sometimes it was simply being human. The calm before Crestfall Station settled into this new rhythm. Training drills became sharper. Recruits began to improvise, testing new methods. Relvar watched proudly as his students improved, but deep down he wondered, if one human could shake an entire training hall with only a mop handle, what would happen when the galaxy faced humanity's full strength? The thought was both exciting and terrifying. Relvar did not know that he would have his answer sooner than he expected. Because far beyond the station, in the cold dark of space, danger was already coming. And when it arrived, the galaxy would remember the human's lesson. Weapons can break, but humans don't stop. The days following the lessons in the Crestfall training hall passed quietly at first. The recruits continued drills, honed their skills, and spoke in hushed tones about the human. Sergeant Arik Hayes. His improvised weapon techniques and calm precision had become a topic of conversation throughout the station. Even the instructors, normally unshakable, admitted that there was something extraordinary about him. But the calm of the station would not last. The alarmment began with the faint hum of emergency sirens, barely audible at first. The lights of the station flickered, then brightened to a harsh red. The communication systems buzzed. "Attention! Intruder alert! Hull breach detected in Sector 7. The automated voice echoed through the corridors. Arik was already moving. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He simply stepped forward, scanning the room and the recruits around him. Many were frozen in fear. A few were scrambling toward the weapons racks, but the automated lockouts made the advanced weapons inaccessible. "Everyone," Arik said calmly, "listen to me. Weapons are down. Shields are still functional in some areas, but we cannot rely on them. We fight with what we have." The room was silent. Not a single recruit doubted him now. Improvised defense, Arik strode through the hallways, gathering whatever could be used as a weapon. Metal rods, pipes, toolboxes, even chunks of broken plating. He handed them to the recruits, showing them how to hold and use each item quickly. "Your strength is important," he said. "Your skill is important. But your mind is more important. If we think, if we adapt, we survive." The station doors hissed open as the intruders, raiders from a nearby system, entered. They were large, armed with advanced rifles and powered blades. Their appearance was sudden and violent, their intent clear: to take control of the station. The recruits tensed. Many looked at Arik for guidance. He lifted a pipe and walked to the center of the main corridor. "Stay behind me. Watch, learn, and act when necessary." The raiders advanced, confident. They expected an easy victory. A soft-worlder human leading a group of trainees? They would fall in minutes. They were wrong. Humans in action. Arik moved first. One raider lunged at him with a powered blade. Arik sidestepped, grabbing a broken panel from the floor. With a swift motion, he rammed it into the raider's chest, knocking him back into the wall. The weapon sparked against the panel, useless now. Another raider came from the left. Arik swung a heavy pipe. It connected with the alien's shoulder, making a sharp crack. The raider stumbled, screaming in pain. The recruits watched in awe. The human did not simply block attacks, he predicted them. He read the raider's movements, using momentum and weight against them. Every swing was precise, every step calculated. Recruits follow inspired, the recruits joined in. One grabbed a metal rod, striking an intruder in the knee. Another used a toolbox as a shield, pushing a raider off balance. The training from the hall had become real-life survival skills. Every improvised weapon, every taught strategy was being applied in the most dangerous way possible. Arik moved among them, directing, demonstrating, and protecting. His calm presence gave them confidence. His words were short but clear. "Use what you find. Don't stop. Keep moving." The raiders, expecting easy prey, were shocked. They had anticipated chaos, not calculated defense. They had superior numbers, superior weapons, but humans adapted in ways they had never seen. Turning the tide, one raider tried to flank Arik from behind. He was large, fast, and armed with a sharp energy blade. Arik did not panic. He saw a piece of piping on the floor. With a swift motion, he kicked it toward the raider, tripping him. Then he ducked under the swing of the blade, using his own momentum to push the raider into a wall. The recruits mirrored his tactics. They used their environment, walls, corners, debris, to gain advantage. They improvised shields, traps, and leverage. Every step the raiders took was countered. Every attack was disrupted. The station became a battlefield of adaptation. The sound of metal striking metal echoed through the corridors. Screams of pain were quickly followed by stunned silence. By now, the raiders were no longer confident. They began to hesitate. Each time they attacked, a human or one of the recruits countered with precision. A moment of realization. Commander Relvar arrived at the scene with additional instructors. They had been observing remotely at first, expecting the humans to fail. But what they saw made them pause. One human, outnumbered and under-equipped, was leading a group of trainees against a full squad of raiders, and winning. Relvar's golden eyes narrowed. He had trained many species in combat, studied warriors from dozens of worlds, but this was different. Humans were not just fighters. They were inventors of survival, masters of adaptation, and leaders by instinct. He allowed himself a small smile. The final push, the raiders regrouped, desperate to gain control. They rushed the central corridor together, hoping to overwhelm the humans. Arik stepped forward alone. Pipe in one hand, broken panel in the other. He didn't hesitate. He met the first raider's charge with a calculated swing, sending him flying back. He blocked another strike with the panel, then used the pipe to hook and unbalance a third. The recruits flanked him, using everything they had learned. One swung a metal rod at a raider's knees, another used a heavy box to block a blade. One placed debris strategically to trip attackers. The coordination was seamless. Every move built on what they had learned in the hall. The raiders were disoriented, frustrated, and exhausted. Within minutes, the tide turned completely. The raiders were either pinned, disarmed, or fleeing. The station remained secure. After the battle, when the last raider fled into the void, the station was silent again. The recruits, breathing heavily, looked at each other in awe. They had survived. They had fought. They had won. And all because of one human. Arik dropped the pipe and panel to the floor, finally breathing a little more heavily himself. He turned to the recruits. "You did well. Remember this. Strength is important. Skill is important. But the mind, your mind, is what will save you. Relvar stepped forward, his golden eyes bright. Indeed. You have proven the lesson we all should have learned long ago. Humans do not rely on what is given to them. They make their own advantage. The instructors nodded in agreement. Some of the trainees who had doubted Arik before now looked at him with newfound respect. Humanity's reputation, word of the battle, spread across the station and beyond. Other species began to take note of the humans on Earth and their tactics. Reports came back to distant systems, describing how one human had led a small group to victory against a trained raider squad, using nothing but improvised weapons and quick thinking. Humans were no longer just soft-worlders. They were innovators, survivors, fighters with endless adaptability. Even Commander Relvar found himself telling new recruits quietly but firmly, "Watch the humans. Learn from them. They fight differently than any species you have trained with before." The mop handle, now placed prominently on the wall of the training hall, became a symbol. It was a reminder that humans could turn anything into a weapon. They could take any situation, no matter how dire, and find a way to survive. The quiet celebration later that evening. The hall was empty except for Arik. He walked slowly along the floor, looking at the mop handle and the tools scattered around. He didn't boast. He didn't celebrate. He knew that the lesson was already learned. A small group of recruits entered quietly. They came not to fight but to ask questions, to learn, to understand. One spoke softly. "Sergeant Hayes, how do you think of all these things so fast?" Arik smiled faintly. "You watch. You adapt. You never give up. And you learn to see the advantage in what others overlook." The recruits nodded. They would remember this forever. The human advantage in the quiet of the station. Commander Relvar reflected on what he had witnessed. Humans were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most armored, but they were something else entirely, something the galaxy could not predict. Resilience, creativity, determination, and above all, the refusal to stop no matter the odds. If the station could survive this attack, then it was not only because of advanced systems or numbers, it was because of a human who had turned broken tools into survival, weakness into strength, and doubt into inspiration. Relvar's final thought lingered in the silence of the station. Humans. Never underestimate them. They will always find a way.